got to pick some people up. You've got to let some people go. The artist is the wedding present. Welcome to episode 6 of Album Armageddon!
Your guys' history or anything to do with the wedding presents? Si, what are your thoughts, feelings, or your overview thoughts and feelings?
My overview of the wedding presents, I have absolutely no history with them at all prior to Album Armageddon.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Initially, we were thinking of doing Bizarro and Si Monsters, where we were trying to match the tracks up, but we just couldn't.
No.
Me and Stu had countless conversations about it. We just couldn't get them to match up in any shape or form. It was, you were taking out things that we didn't want to take out and things like that. So I did listen to both Bizarro and Si Monsters in order to get the original opening lyrics for our intro, and it kind of gave me some pre-formed thoughts about the band.
Okay.
One being they very much reminded me of the Boo Radleys. The Boo Radleys were very inspired by them with their jangly guitars. And it also preformed some other thoughts, which will make them as clear as we progress through the albums.
Very good. Cath, how about yourself?
I probably have heard their stuff before, but without realising it.
Right.
I've never knowingly listened to them.
Yeah.
So
I mean, Kennedy was a really big in clubs, and things like that.
Yeah.
So, and Deliverance and.
Well, I went to a lot of
like
indie clubs in my teenage years, so yeah, no doubt have heard some of the tracks before, but didn't really remember them. Didn't know that I was listening to them. Yeah. So I feel like this is the first time I've sort of been aware that this is what they actually sound
like. Okay, right, okay. How about you, Robbie?
Bugger all.
No, that really surprised me because I thought you would.
Well, I know the name.
Aware of their stuff they've had before.
Yeah, I recognise the name, but as Cath said, I've probably heard stuff inadvertently without realising it. So obviously 27 members had a bit of a dig on David Gedge to think, well, is he difficult to work with or what's the story? But it turns out it's very much a case of, it's a bit like Queens of the Stone Age and Masters of Reality, where it's just people aren't going to hang around.
No.
And people's priorities change, and it just ends up being a rotating cast of people around David Gedge. But interestingly, on George Best 30, which I believe was released in '89,
correct,
their drummer Sean Charman, who got fired, was far superior, in my opinion, to the drummer on Watsui. Watsui. I'll put a typo in my own notes there. An album that they didn't release, Watsui. So I don't know who the drummer was on Watsui, but totally outclassed by Sean Charman, in my humble opinion.
Wow.
And I wonder what happened with Sean Charman to get him fired.
Well, I've got a bit of a background story on that one. Okay, so I'm gonna. Well, my history with the wedding presents are.
Yeah, what's your history with the wedding presents?
To be fair, a fairly late bloomer to them. When I say late bloomer, probably about the early 2000s. I really got into them.
Okay.
And I happened. It couldn't get more stereotypical. I was on a sequel development course in Leeds, and I was there for 5 days. Got to admit, I'm sorry if anybody comes from Leeds, but I didn't particularly like it. But remember, that was over 25 years ago, so I'm sure it's a lovely place now. Anyway, so I was walking around, and I was thinking, I'm a bit bored. Let's go to some record shops, because back then there were actual record shops as well, not boutique record shops where you go, so I'll spend £50 on a record. No, they were like £12 or whatever, normal price for records. And I heard this. I heard. I was aware of Wedding Present anyway, because like friends used to be into them and that, but they just never clicked with me. So I got into the shop, and I was thinking it was playing Brassneck, which I've heard many, many times, but it just some for reason clicked, and I went, I'm gonna buy some albums of theirs and just see what it's all about, and that's when they hooked me in, and then. I didn't realize how many of my friends actually really liked them as well. So that was quite handy. I suppose if you've got that friend network as well, who they were into the same thing, it just makes that a lot easier as well. So, right then. So,
I just want to say, I think this is probably one of the best things about the podcast that we're doing, it's like for three of us, this is pretty much new music.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I would never have searched them up. I hadn't
No.
heard of them. It wouldn't have been a Google search or anything like that. And I don't
Yeah.
think Spotify and all its algorithms, I don't think they would have ever recommended it
No.
based on what I
No.
listened to either.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's complete eye opener and ear opener.
Cool. Well, there is a reason I have picked George Best 30 and not the original recording of George Best. If I did pick the original recording of George Best, I would have used the track list from George Best 30 because it was just a lot nicer track. The only reason I chose George Best 30 is because of the recording technique was it was equal, better or worse, but only slightly to Watsui. You know, it's the original one, it's
Watsui.
very a product of its. It's a very 1980s, early Smiths, early Cure,
almost demo like.
Yes, that kind of. But that was the sign of the time. So therefore, I can't. And because I knew that you guys never really had listened to it, I just thought, maybe it would just be easier just to do it like that. I don't know. It might be I might have actually called it the wrong thing, and you can slate it because of that. I have no idea. We'll find out later. But I do highly recommend now listening to the original because I think the some bits are better on the original one, just because they were younger and there was that energy there. Where the re-recording they did, obviously, because they had money and they could do studio recording of it, and they did a proper recording. But let's talk about George Best. Get my notes up.
Okay,
right,
let's get on
it. Edit all this bush out. Right, so. As I said previously, George Best was the band's first album and was released in '87. Upon release, the album was critically acclaimed, and it was a massive album at the time. When you look all back on the Enemy reviews and all that kind of stuff, it was really good. Musically, the album featured a fast-paced rhythm guitar. Lyrically, apart from a couple of songs, it's all about Gench, love, lust, heartbreak, and revenge. And that's Gench's MO through every project he's ever done.
Oh, we have noticed.
There are a handful of songs, and when they said a handful of songs, I went, "Were there?" And I'm saying that, and I'm going, "Were there?" Okay, I'll find these one anyway. Now, this is where I suggest you listen to the original, and this might answer your question, Robbie. So, the drums on the original recording were played by Simon Simmons. He played an acoustic kit, but when you listen to the original recording, it sounds like a 1980s shit drum machine,
right?
And because the producer at the time basically didn't like the sound, and he basically overlaid an electric kit over what he was playing, and that caused a load of friction between the bands in there, and that was one of the reasons why they kind of, I wouldn't say why he split from the band, but as you hear, he's a very, very fast-paced drummer. He's actually not very dynamic either. He's literally smashing the hi-hat to death at ridiculous speeds, and back then no dynamics in his playing, so therefore he's playing that fast and that hard. And when you're playing like hundreds of gigs, that does take out of you after a while, kind of thing. There's also I will get onto this a little bit, but they made a documentary about the George Best 30 album, which is fantastic because they get the original producer, and basically nobody gone with the original producer, and it was just this documentary is sanctioned by Wedding Present, no holds barred. It was rubbish. I didn't like it. I didn't like them. I left because of that, and it was really good in that sense. So, so in 2007, the band played the 20th anniversary tour of George Best, performing the album in its entirety. 2008, they made a live in studio recording, and that's the one we're listening to. But it wasn't released until 2017. With accompanying release as well, there was that documentary I was talking about called Wedding Present, Something Left Behind. And it is really good. If you don't like the Wedding Present now, is it a hard watch? Probably. But I think it's a really good documentary anyway. As I say, we'll be using the re-recording of George Best 30 because I think the sound engineer was probably better on that one. So, right then. Watsui. Very short notes on Watsui as well.
I've got it down as Watsui.
It's Watsui.
Watsui.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, Spotify, I've got it wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Has he?
Okay.
Microphone drop.
Right. Watsui was released in '94 on Island Records and peaked at number 47 on the UK charts. Gedge and Smith went to Seattle to record with producer Steve Fisk, who I didn't realize, but he was a guy who worked on the Sub Pop label, did the stuff for Sub Pop, which was massive back then, Seattle scene and all that stuff. And as a result, Watsui was both a really commercial and clean sounding album. The singles, yeah, and It's a Gas, it just, well, to me, there's a lot of standout tracks on that album, but they're the ones what really got out of there as well, got famous. John Peel, now whether you agree with this one, John Peel had a comment that Gedge had written, and I quote, some of the best love songs of a rock and roll era.
What fucking era?
Listen, he's a dead man. You can't dig him up now and ask him why. I'm just saying. He's a legend, but he's, dead. Watsui was released in 2014, and the band played its entirety in 2014. However, I believe we're in 2024 now, and it's the 30th anniversary of that album, and they are actually touring that album again this year. So I might even be seeing that one. I don't know.
It's not called Watsui, it's called Watusi.
It is called Watusi. I've just been looking at that.
Yeah, me too. I just looked at the discography and the album cover. It's like, am I in a different reality?
Sorry, my bad. Right, with that bombshell.
How dare you challenge the fact god?